If your child eats beige foods, then this video is for you. We have a growing number of kids who eat the beige food diet: chicken nuggets, crackers, pasta, bread, French fries. I don't believe that this is a phase. I also don't believe it's defiance. And I don't like the label picky eating. There are so many factors that can contribute to this. A message from their gut, their nervous system, and sometimes even from culture. By the end of this video, you're going to understand what those messages may be, what beige foods might actually mean, and 5 hidden causes that you can investigate to bring color back to their plate and confidence back to their little body. I'm not going to give you hacks or tricks or sneak in the vegetable trick. That's not what this channel is about. I'm Lisa Genza, a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and a functional nutrition educator, and I've worked with hundreds of families and thousands of kids, and have personally battled food cravings so intense I could barely think straight. So today we're going to go deeper. Let's talk about this growing beige food generation. More kids today eat a diet that is almost entirely beige. Bread, crackers, cereal, pasta, chips, fries, nuggets, maybe applesauce, maybe a banana on a good day. Parents tell me if I don't give them what they want, they won't eat. They won't try anything new. They gag at new textures. They can't handle anything with color. And I want you to hear this. Your child is not broken, and their behavior is communicating something. You know, beige foods are easy and they're soft, they're bland, they're predictable. They're usually dopamine boosting because they're ultra processed. So they're the path of least resistance for a stressed, inflamed, or overwhelmed body. Before we talk about biology, there's something else that we can address. Not all food refusal begins in the gut. Sometimes it begins in the body, the sensory system, or the emotional experience a child has around eating. And I want to honor that. Many feeding specialists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, programs like Feeding Littles or Kids Eat in Color focus on how a child is experiencing food, not what's happening inside the body. And they're right to do that because for many children, eating is not easy. Some kids may struggle because of sensory processing differences. Some kids feel flavors more intensely. Some textures may feel too loud for them. Mixed foods like casseroles or stir fries could feel overwhelming because the brain can't predict what each bite will be. This isn't pickiness, this is sensory overload. And children with sensory sensitivities may prefer foods that are predictable, soft, beige, they're uniform, and texturally they're quiet. These foods feel safe to their nervous system. They could also have mechanical or oral motor challenges, like some kids avoid meat or crunchy vegetables or chewing food because chewing is physically hard for them. They may have low oral muscle tone or delayed chewing development. Did they have a history of being tongue-tied, or do they have limited jaw strength? The other thing that we need to consider is any emotional experience they may have had, like a past choking or gagging experience. If eating feels like work, they'll naturally choose easy foods. Texture aversion or fear after a bad experience can also be present because kids may avoid foods because they once gagged or choked, or because someone forced them to take a bite, or they felt embarrassed in front of others. And the brain associates this food now with discomfort. So their nervous system is protecting them by saying, let's not try that again. Beige foods tend to be more predictable, and predictable is safe. And of course, we can't rule out other emotional and family mealtime stress. Kids may resort to those beige foods because mealtimes feel rushed, or there's a battle or a negotiation going on at home, or we're rushing in from work, or we're rushing to get out the door, and kids naturally retreat to comfort foods instead of exploring new foods. Food avoidance sometimes isn't about the food, but about the feeling around the table. So here's the important part. All of these sensory, physical, and emotional challenges matter. They're real and they deserve compassion. And feeding specialists do amazing work to help kids feel safe. They focus a lot on external safety, which absolutely matters, like proper seating, having their feet stable on the floor, having a predictable mealtime routine, having calm conversations, sensory exploration of the food, and having a no-pressure environment. We've seen the food ladders and the smell, touch, lick, bite, chew ladder, where we encourage kids one small step at a time. But I also think there's a biological component. Even when mealtime is safe, the child may not expand. Even when the pressure is removed, new foods may not be accepted. Even when emotions are calm, they may still crave those beige foods. That's when we need to look deeper, because once we've addressed sensory, emotional, and mechanical safety and a child is still stuck on beige foods, now it may not be about the food or the environment anymore. It could be biology. And that's where we're headed next. Let me show you what could be happening inside the body that keeps kids stuck in a beige food world, even when everything on the outside has improved. Let's look underneath the behavior, because beige foods aren't the problem, they're the signal. I'm not sure why this isn't a more prevalent conversation, but the truth that most parents have never been told is that their kids could actually have a mineral deficiency, a gut imbalance, or have a dopamine crash or dopamine deficiency. See, kids don't just crave beige on purpose like their biology does. So I'm going to quickly break down 4 major biological drivers that we could investigate when I run labs like the HTMA or the GI map or the OAT test or an MRT food sensitivity panel, and even glyphosate testing, which we can do through urine. So if there's gut dysbiosis, we're going to see carb cravings. When the gut is inflamed or imbalanced, kids instinctively reach for simple carbohydrates because they're easiest to digest. A GI map would show us yeast or candida overgrowth, Clostridia overgrowth. It really gives us a lay of the land to see what the microbiome is doing. It can tell us if we have low digestive enzymes, if there's inflammation, looking for leaky gut and poor absorption, because kids who avoid protein and vegetables could be like me. I had chronic candida and yeast overgrowth for years and years, and yeast and candida crave carbohydrates. They don't like protein and vegetables. You know, when there's yeast and candida overgrowth in a child's gut, it can cause bloating and rashes. And yes, it actually hijacks cravings. Yeast feed on simple sugars and starches, so they signal the brain to seek out the foods that help them to survive. Crackers, pasta, bread, chips, yogurt. It's those beige, fast digesting carbohydrates. As yeast ferments these carbs, they release byproducts, acetaldehyde, that disrupt blood sugar, drain dopamine, and leave a child feeling irritable or foggy unless they get another quick carb hit. This creates a biochemical loop where the child isn't craving beige food because they like carbs. They're craving them because the yeast inside their gut are demanding fuel. Beige food becomes a metabolic shortcut, like fast energy for the child and a full buffet for the yeast. I have a special place in my heart for these kiddos because I suffered from this most of my life, and my parents would joke about me not eating meat and shoveling in the carbs. I was chronically bloated and the cravings were incessant. Candida and yeast overgrowth probably deserves its own video for me to go deeper, but just know that antibiotic use can lead to yeast overgrowth, and left unchecked, yeast overgrowth can lead to a myriad of problems, including depression, fatigue, body aches, and more. And then we also have mineral imbalances that drive beige behavior. On HTMA tests, there are clear patterns behind carb cravings. Low zinc, food tastes off, maybe metallic or too intense. If they have high copper, low zinc, there could be sensory overwhelm and anxiety. Low magnesium can cause blood sugar instability and constant carb seeking. Low sodium or low potassium can cause fatigue. That makes us look for those quick energy foods. And if there's a calcium shell, then we could have emotional shutdown and texture aversion. Low chromium causes unstable insulin and sweet cravings. So in these cases, kids aren't being picky if they're mineral deficient. The label of picky eating is just too broad, and I almost feel like by labeling a child that, we're making it the child's fault. We also have to consider dopamine dysregulation. Beige foods spike dopamine quickly and then crash it, and kids get stuck in a biochemical loop. Eat refined carbs, feel good, dopamine surge, dopamine drop, and then we need more refined carbohydrates to feel okay again. And this is not behavior, this is chemistry. Why I feel that kids today are so dopamine dysregulated is because they live in a world their biology was never designed for. A world that constantly overstimulates, yet undernourishes. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter responsible for motivation, curiosity, attention, and the ability to try new things. But several modern forces drain dopamine faster than children can rebuild it, like ultra-processed foods, and beige foods are engineered for dopamine hits. I've done other videos about the addictive food model and how these foods were engineered to hit a bliss point. The sugar and refined starches spike dopamine sharply and then crash it, leaving kids tired, irritable, and seeking another quick carb to feel normal again. Over time, the brain downregulates dopamine receptors, meaning it takes more to stimulate to get the same effect. And then we can't forget about blue lights and screens, which we didn't even have a generation or two ago. Tablets, phones, TVs, LED lights, all of them overstimulate the retina and the brain, which burns dopamine at an unnatural rate. Kids who have screen time in the evening or at meals show stronger sugar cravings, more emotional volatility, and shorter attention spans. Their brain is chasing little dopamine boosts all day long. I'm really concerned that we're raising a whole generation of addicts. And then chronic stress and overwhelm. Kids today experience constant micro stressors, rushing, overscheduling, school pressures, noise, sensory overload, emotional tension at home. Stress hormones like cortisol degrade dopamine, leaving kids mentally drained and more dependent on easy comforts like beige foods or more screen time. And of course, we have gut imbalances. Gut dysbiosis, yeast, and inflammation can interfere with the gut's ability to produce and regulate neurotransmitters, including dopamine. A stressed or an inflamed gut means a stressed or overwhelmed brain. Kids with yeast overgrowth or poor digestion often act dopamine starved, seeking immediate gratification, carbs, or entertainment. And lack of sunlight. Sunlight is one of the strongest natural dopamine builders. Kids today spend significantly less time outside than any previous generation. Without morning sunlight, their circadian rhythm is disrupted, which suppresses dopamine and leads to more cravings, lower motivation, and more sensory rigidity around food. And then we have the mineral deficiencies, low zinc, magnesium, iron, B vitamins, and amino acids that all impair dopamine synthesis. Without the raw materials to produce dopamine, kids go into a conservation mode, relying on fast dopamine from screens and carbs. Kids aren't dopamine dysregulated because they're lazy or undisciplined. They're dysregulated because the modern world is stripping dopamine away while giving them nothing to rebuild it. And when dopamine is low, we see their curiosity drop, their motivation decline, their appetite for new foods is non-existent. The cravings for those beige foods increases. Kids don't crave beige because they're picky. They crave beige because their dopamine system is overwhelmed and under-resourced. And I would be remiss not to mention the damage that has been done by glyphosate, the most widely used herbicide. It disrupts gut bacteria, mineral absorption, amino acids, and the serotonin pathway. Glyphosate doesn't just harm the microbiome, it binds minerals and blocks absorption. Glyphosate, in the work of Dr. Stephanie Seneff, has been proven to be a chelator. It means it grabs onto minerals and then makes them unavailable. The minerals most affected are zinc, the number one mineral deficiency in picky eaters, magnesium, which helps our blood sugar and keeps us calm, manganese, which affects growth, detox, and energy, iron, which we need for dopamine, copper, which goes up when zinc drops, and selenium, which we need for detoxification and thyroid and immunity. When these minerals can't be absorbed, kids show low appetite, carb cravings, sensory issues, emotional volatility, fatigue, and we're seeing poor detoxification, weak digestion, and slowed growth. This is why glyphosate exposure often shows up clearly in an HTMA panel. Glyphosate disrupts enzymes that depend on minerals. It interferes with the shikimate pathway in microbes, the pathway that they use to make tryptophan, tyrosine, and phenylalanine. These are the amino acids that become serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. When these pathways are disrupted, kids experience low motivation, low curiosity, food rigidity, and dopamine-driven cravings for simple carbohydrates. See, this emotional dysregulation, this behavior isn't the problem. We need to be looking at what's causing this problem. Glyphosate disrupts sulfur and methylation pathways, which affects our ability to detox and repair our gut lining. So while it's damaging our gut lining, we are also limiting the ability with the inhibition of amino acids to rebuild our gut lining. When these pathways slow down, inflammation rises, and kids naturally gravitate towards foods that feel safe, predictable, and easy to digest. You guessed it, those beige foods. Glyphosate kills good bacteria, feeds the bad bacteria, causes leaky gut, blocks minerals, disrupts our neurotransmitters, and leave kids craving the foods that bring them comfort. Beige, simple carbohydrates. It's worthwhile to do a urine test for glyphosate levels and work with a functional health practitioner. Their beige diet isn't random, and while the tips from feeding specialists are helpful, I'm very concerned that our kids are dealing with an onslaught of chemicals, and what we're seeing is a biochemical adaptation. Before we move on, there's one more root cause that parents rarely hear about. And honestly, it may not seem to be directly correlated, but I believe it's a major contributor, and that's blue light. Not sunlight. I'm talking about artificial blue light from screens, tablets, phones, and even those bright LEDs used in classrooms. If you've never heard this before, stay with me because this is a game changer. When kids are exposed to blue light, especially at night, it destroys dopamine and it disrupts melatonin, which will confuse insulin, and it wrecks their sense of hunger and fullness. And here's why that matters for beige dieters. When dopamine drops, the brain craves quick hits, and the fastest hit comes from simple carbohydrates. So this isn't misbehavior, it's the brain screaming for energy and balance. And Dr. Jack Kruse, a neurosurgeon and mitochondrial expert, has been speaking out rather loudly about the damage that we are doing with blue screens and the need to limit blue screen exposure, really for all of us and especially our kids. I'm not going to go deep into the science here. That's its own video, and trust me, that video is coming as I learn more. Because the light environment is just as important as the food environment. But I will say this, if your child lives on screens and beige foods, those two things are connected. Their cravings aren't random. It's a circadian signal. So stay subscribed, hit the bell, because I'm releasing a video soon that will make more sense on how blue light hijacks your child's appetite and drives beige food cravings. Now let's take a collective breath, because this is a lot of information. We live in a culture that is overstimulated, overworked, overprocessed, and at this point, overwhelmed. Parents just want answers, and kids feel this. Don't underestimate how your stress affects them. Convenience culture has created a dependency loop, and those beige foods have become comforting. So we have to address the emotional layer. Food as comfort, food as a distraction, food as connection. We are all reaching for something in our environment that feels safe, comforting, and rewarding, not just the kids. And when we understand this, we stop seeing picky eaters and we start seeing children who are overwhelmed by the world we've built around them, which brings me to a story, my story. I had carb cravings from as young as I could remember and a disdain for protein. I had an insatiable appetite for pasta, bread, and sweets. I was addicted to stimulants like caffeine, lots of coffee. And by age 30, I was taking antidepressants. I ate out 7 days a week because of my job, and I lived on ultra-processed foods. At age 36, my triglycerides were over 300. I was pre-diabetic, exhausted, and emotionally drained. I had a lot to learn and change to heal myself. That was really the impetus for me becoming a health coach and then a functional health practitioner. I've spent 17 years immersed in continuous learning and coaching others. And while I'm happy to help, I'm deeply saddened by how many people are suffering. Here's the path forward. Simple, clear, and compassionate. We need to assess the biology through testing like a hair tissue mineral analysis, a GI map. We need to do an oats test, look for heavy metal toxicity, do a glyphosate urine test, MRT, a food sensitivity test. We can uncover why a child is craving certain foods. and stop guessing. We can start seeing. We can rebuild internal safety. Once we understand the biology, the next step is helping the child to feel safe again, because a dysregulated body cannot explore new foods. This is where we gently support the gut, balance minerals, and stabilize blood sugar so the nervous system can finally relax. Instead of forcing new foods, we start by improving the quality of the foods a child already accepts, what I call like the bridge foods. We add protein and healthy fats to calm dopamine swings, use upgraded versions of their favorite beige foods, and support digestion so their body stops fearing meals. As minerals like zinc, magnesium, potassium, and iron rebalance and inflammation calms down, children naturally become more open, curious, and willing to engage. Internal safety always comes before external success at the dinner table, and once the body feels predictable and calm on the inside, curiosity begins to return all on its own. This is where cooking classes come in. When kids actually grind the oats, smell the spices, stir the batter, chop, taste, experience, they reclaim agency and they rebuild their confidence. Curious returns before compliance, and color starts coming back to their plate naturally, not through force, but through empowerment. By engaging them, enrolling them in the process, developing their sense of pride. This is what I love to do. I love watching this transformation happen. If this video has opened your eyes to what your child's beige diet might be telling you, let me know in the comments. Would a guide on the hidden causes of beige eating be helpful, or a list of labs that you could run? Your comments help to guide my next videos. And remember, freedom begins and ends in our kitchen. So let's build families that are free. We need to free our kids.